Hey guys, John Paul here, and I've had a lot of my workshop clients ask me how to stitch multiple digital images in order to either make a long panoramic image or to get a higher resolution image that they may want to enlarge much more for a gallery piece or to put on their wall. So this is a little different for me, but I want to share with you the quick and easy way it can be done in Lightroom Creative Cloud here. Okay, so I've got my three images here at the bottom. I'm gonna, oops, sorry about that. I'm gonna click on my first image and then I'm gonna hold the Shift key, click on the last one. I've got all three selected in Lightroom. I'm gonna, in the library module, sorry, and I'm gonna click on my develop module. And you can see here at the bottom that all three images that I want to stitch together are highlighted. Now I'm simply going to go up to Photo, Photo Merge, and Panorama. Now the computer's creating the panorama preview. The reason I'm doing this in Lightroom now, as opposed to how we used to do it, which was to go and do photo merge in Photoshop and it would send the images over there. Now with the new Creative Cloud in Lightroom, it actually stitches the images together into a panorama and keeps the composite as a raw file, so we can make all those critical adjustments and fine-tune things with the raw image, not affecting the actual image itself. And there are some pretty neat tools in Lightroom, so it's good for that. So I'm going to keep this here on spherical, and the auto crop button, oftentimes I don't use that, but as you can see, there was a little distortion where I had moved the camera, rotated the camera on my tripod. So since it's minimal and I'm actually looking at doing a much tighter crop here, I'm going to go ahead and click auto crop just because it makes it a little more clean. I'm going to hit merge, and you can see up here Lightroom is creating the panorama, and it takes a little bit, so we'll just wait. Please remember, now that I'm focusing a little more on sharing on my YouTube channel, if you have questions, things you'd like in the traditional darkroom, out in the field shooting either digital or film, large format film, I'm looking for content and topics that are going to have value to you guys, that you're going to want to read. Okay, so our panorama is complete, I believe, and here we are. If you look down in the bottom, we've got our three images, and then next to them we have our panorama. So I'm going to click on that, and here it is. This is the stitched version of the three images. Now, the first thing I generally do is go to lens correction, and I just like to get this out of the way. The software Lightroom has thousands of lenses stored, and each of them have a quirk, a little bit of distortion or chromatic aberration that occur, what have you. So personally, I like to click those two buttons first thing, get that cleaned up. If I click it on and off, you can watch the image and see that there was a little bit of correction there, especially when you're rotating that lens and stitching things together. You get a little exaggerated distortion, so I like to do that. Next step for me, and keep in mind I'm envisioning this in black and white, and I actually shot 4x5" black and white film when I was out there, but I've chosen the crop tool. I'm not going to use the straighten tool because I use my virtual horizon on my camera all the time, and I know that this is level and square. So I'm going to go ahead and bring the edges of the crop down to where I'd like them. I want to get rid of all that craziness up here. It adds nothing but distraction to the picture. I bring it just to the very top of the waterfall. This is really kind of the focal point through here. Next, I'm going to bring the bottom up, and not quite sure how far yet. Around here, I like the leading line aspect of these rocks with the snow. I think it softens the strength of the shadow back here, and also enables that shadow area to be a focal point, but it's not too much black there. I'm going to bring the left side in, and I think I'm just going to leave it about here. I want to give a little bit of room for this tree trunk. I don't want it to be right on the edge. I want to elongate the picture. And this little corner down here, I don't really have an issue with it. Oh, given that, what I do have an issue with is the edge of that rock. So I'm going to bring this up just to the edge of that. And this little bit down here in the bottom will clone out when we go over to Photoshop. The left side, I love aspen trees. That's just distracting. So I'm going to bring this in, get rid of that, and you know, you can use your own judgment. This is a little distracting. Might clone that out, you might crop it, but for the moment I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to get too carried away. So I've got my crop for our purposes for the video right where I want it. Next thing I'm going to do is just hit return or enter, and there is my crop. So I like that. The next step that I take is very simply, I'm going to go to the color and black and white area here, and I've chosen black and white. Let's see, I'll go back to color. I just don't think there's anything of quality in color there. My vision was black and white with this, so I'm going to go ahead over to black and white, and I really like that. I'm not going to mess with the channel sliders here because A, there's not a lot of color in here, and B, sometimes if you push these color sliders too far, you can introduce a little bit of noise in there. So I'm just going to close that up. I'm going to go up to my basic adjustments, and this is really a majority of what I do in Photoshop. I don't need to adjust my color temperature, which is something I might do with a color image. Obviously, we've got black and white here, but I'm looking up at my histogram. I'm really safe on the highlight end, and I'm not going to alter that because I was in overcast conditions. The white wasn't totally white, and there's so much of it there. I want to hold on to a little bit of detail. You've got to envision your image. If I were to print this in a 7, 8, 9 foot print, I want to see detail everywhere. So I think in contrast to the shadows, the white is looking pretty good. One major adjustment I make is to the shadow and highlight sliders in general. I'll just point out there is a little bit of gap here. I haven't lost shadows completely. I do have detail in the highlights, or shadows rather. So I'm going to grab the shadow slider and I'm going to pull it up. Okay, and I'm going to be not too extreme, but a little bit, because one of the things I loved was the reflected light off of the water was enabling me to see some of the lighter tones in the mosses here. So I really want to see that. I want to pull that up. The highlights, in order to save detail down here, even though my histogram is showing me I'm fine, just so you can see it, a lot of images, I'll actually grab the highlight slider and bring it all the way down. Now, I don't want to make my whites gray. I can see how much room I have up here, so I'm going to temper that. I'm not trying to save highlights from being lost, but I am going to pull it down just a little bit. You know what? I'm going to keep some contrast in here, so I'm going to bring that back up to 0, and we've got our shadow adjustment done. Clarity, vibrance, I'm not going to bother with these. I've got a very high resolution file. I shot 3 vertical images with my Nikon D800, and I've got a lot of info here, so I don't need clarity. I don't like images to look sharp. I like them to look clear, if that makes sense. And that kind of pulls over from the fact that I almost exclusively shoot large format film, and I like that natural look that I get. So basically, I'm done here in Lightroom. I'm going to go back up to Photo, edit in, and I'm going to bring this image over now to Adobe Photoshop Creative Cloud. And this will take just a minute. There we go. And the neat thing is, I believe with this new setup with Creative Cloud, this actually remains a raw file. So the first thing I'm going to do is just get rid of that little spot in the corner. I'm going to use the spot healing brush. Okay, and it's actually about the right size. If you haven't used this, it's like magic, but you can adjust your brush size up here and make it quite large. Usually you're trying to keep it as small as possible because you want to alter and affect as few pixels as possible to keep things nice and clear and natural. So as you can see, I'm just going to click here and cover that little corner, and it's gone like magic. This little spot here caught my eye. It's really as easy as that, and then I think that's a stick. I'm leaving it. I don't like to go overboard. I do a little bit more dust spotting with my large format files that are scanned from big sheets of film. The plastic picks up dust everywhere. So now that we're in Photoshop, I'm going to keep this minimal. I'm going to go up to Layer. Let's see here, New Adjustment Layer, and I'm going to go to Levels. And then almost all of my layers in Photoshop I work on in luminosity, and that's so I'm working just on the light, the light and dark. I don't, in general, want to alter colors and what have you. I just want to focus on this one thing. So now, a nice little trick is if you click on the Alt or Option key and hold it down, and over here on the histogram, if you click on the highlight slider, as you move it over, you can see I have room here. I'm not clipping highlights at all, which is great. Once I get into the area, as you watch on the screen, where I'm starting to clip and lose highlights, you get those little warnings. So I can leave it there, and if I let go of the Alt Option key, you can see how I'm blowing that out. If I hold the Alt Option key again, I'm going to bring that back down, and I'm actually going to go just a couple percent out of the highlight area. I want to make sure there's a little detail in there while still looking very white. On the opposite end, I'm going to click the Alt Option key again and hold it. Click on the shadow slider, and again, I'm not losing any shadows here. As I move it over, you can see that I start to see where grays are turning to total black with no detail. And I'll let go of the Alt Option key. You can see in certain images that can be really dramatic. For this, it really loses the detail underneath the overhang there in the rock. And I want to keep a little detail. So I'm going to pull this back over until I just have a couple speckles of black. I like that a lot better. Next, I'm going to do a mid-tone layer here. So I'm going to go Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Curves. And let's see here. Once again, I'm going to work in luminosity. I'm going to click OK. And once again, we have our histogram. Okay, now I'm going to keep the highlights and shadows where they are, and if you click on the hand up here, that is going to give us an indicator. As I move it around here on the picture, you will see over here along the neutral line on the histogram, you'll see a little bubble move around there. It's showing where on the histogram the spot I'm pointing at on the image is, and I think that's super helpful. So what I want to do is I'm going to click down here. I want to grab these midtones and I want to protect them. I don't want to move that at all. So I'm going to, doesn't want to do it, it's a little too close. I'm going to click right about here. Okay, oops. Yeah, I'm going to try it again. Let me move up, there we go. Okay, so what that's going to do is that's going to lock that position on the curve, and that way when I make other adjustments, that part of the curve isn't going to move around and lose that feeling that I have in there. I like that. So what I'm going to do now is where I'm really seeing a lack of contrast is here in the rocks, in the grays. And again, it was an overcast, shaded day. Actually, it wasn't overcast. It was the fact that I was in shade in a canyon near sunset. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 points on this rock. First, I'm going to go to this lichen up here that's really light colored. And I'm going to click that spot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce contrast in the middle range here to add a little more pop to the image. Now I'm going to go over to the darker lichen, and here we go, right about there, and that's going to be my mid-range shadow detail. And I generally adjust my shadows first. Sometimes a minor adjustment in the shadow makes the highlight sing. So I've got this point highlighted. I'm going to go to my right arrow on my keyboard. You can grab that and you can pull it, but I like to be much more subtle. So I'm going to grab that or put my finger on that right arrow key, and I'm just going to click it once, twice, and for our purposes, I'm going to go a little darker, just so you guys see the effect. That was about 7 or 8 clicks, which is about 14 points, I think. And I really like, if you go over to the eye icon here and hold that, I can turn the effect off. You can see where we were. Now we've got a little more richness in the darker grays, but it's still a little flat. So I'm going to come back up to my mid-tone brighter point. And now I'm going to go to the left arrow key, and I'm going to click that, and again, just subtly. And you can see how we start to have a little more contrast there. Now, my highlights up here really started moving. So the whites in the snow, as I pulled this down, the other points become sort of a pivot point, and there's a lot of white right around this point here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click up here and use the right arrow key again, and I'm just going to correct for that because I want highlight, but in that amount of volume I think it's a little much. So the down key, the right key, and I just bring it back to where we were. So now here in the middle of the curve, we've added contrast, and I'm going to turn this on and off again. Here's off, and then back on. And I think it's just a huge improvement. Sorry, lost my thought there. The other things I would do, let's see here. One of the things I might consider is bringing up a touch of the mid-tone shadow detail. So I'll show you. We've got a dodge tool here, and this is just like in the darkroom, dodging and burning. I'm going to go to mid-tones there, and normally, well, I'll do it the way I would. I would be down at about 11–10%, and I'm going to hold my mouse key down, and I'm just going to grab and brush some of those mid-tone subtleties and bring a little bit more detail there. So again, it's very subtle, but as you start to enlarge an image, it'll make a big difference for you. This ice-covered rock really grabbed my eye, so I'm going to dodge the highlights, and you can see it'll be very subtle, but the highlights there will really come up, and there we go. There we go. To do this, you've got to be on the background layer. Sorry about that. So just subtle. And the thing I think is most powerful about programs like Photoshop is the fact that you can be very subtle with them. Another way I make adjustments is I'm looking here and I'm thinking, you know, this water is nice, but it's not that contrasty compared to the white water flowing through it. So again, I'm on my background layer. I'm choosing the Lasso tool, and very simply, I'm just going to create a border here. I'm going to lasso, quite literally, this area that I want to adjust, and I don't want a super hard line there, so I'm going to go up to Select, Modify, and Feather. And I want the area of this to be soft, just like I would feather in when burning something in the darkroom. I'm actually going to go way up to 200 pixels. Click OK. And so you can see how this is feathered in the edge. If you click Q on your keyboard, you can see how soft that is. So I'm liking that. Click Q again. I'm going to go up to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Curves, Luminosity, and I just want to adjust the grays here and make them more of a black. So I'm going to go on to the darker tones. I'm going to grab that. I'm holding my mouse, and I'm going to just pull it down. Yeah, so it's not too much, but it gives me a nice contrast from the highlights. The final thing I might consider doing then is, again, in the background layer, I'm going to go up to my dodge tool, and again, I'm going to dodge these highlights. I'm going to just bring out the edges of the water that's tailing into that darker water, and I think it enhances that nicely. Hey, if you've enjoyed this, please let me know. It's the first video I've done in the digital darkroom. I would love to hear input and comments. Be a little bit kind. As I said, I am starting out, but if you would like to learn specific things in the digital darkroom, in the film darkroom, these days I'm specifically working moving from my film to enlarged digital negatives and doing platinum palladium prints in the darkroom, but also questions in the field, digital photography, film photography, specifically large format film photography. But I'm more than happy to share. I want to add value and help the photo community that I'm part of. I'm going to put a couple links to my website and my newsletter below. Please enjoy what I share with you. Let me know what you think, and let me know what you'd like to see. I'd like to make this something that you enjoy being part of, and a community we can all build together. Thank you.